Is Redeeming Love safe to watch for Christians? Is it actually a Christian film? Was Ruslan KD and Alisa Childers correct about this movie?
Spirit Life!
Viewer discretion advised on this episode because I am going to talk about human sexuality in the midst of this movie review. I'm Bruce Wham, your Christian movie reviewer on Spirit Life, and today's movie is Redeeming Love. It is a romance film, so that's why we're touching upon that topic. Why did Ruslan and Alisa Childers say that they're not even going to watch the movie? Why has this movie had so much controversy? Is it really a Christian film? Does it deserve the PG-13 rating? I'm going to start my review by saying that I have perhaps a little bit different opinion than other people out there. As a Christian husband, I actually believe that in media, whether it's Christian media or secular media, couples that are married should be portrayed as having romance. And I would even go so far as to say that especially Christian couples need to be portrayed in media as having a little bit of spice. In other words, I mean to say that Christian couples need to be portrayed as having a vibrant and healthy sex life. Christian sex is the best sex out there, period. Now, when I say that, I'm sure there's so many people that would say, well, what are you talking about? Christians are fuddy-duddy. And that's my exact point. Because in media, almost always, Christians are portrayed as dull and boring, and they're just prudes. They don't have any sex life or sex drive. They're not into it. It's just begrudging or just kind of very plain and vanilla. And the truth could not be further from that. God designed sex. It's a gift to married couples. Now, anybody can use that gift outside of the boundaries that God designed, but when they do so, they're not really enjoying what God intended. Sex is pleasurable. It's fun. There's not only a physical pleasure, but there's also a mental and an emotional connection with your partner. God designed that for marriage. Christians have the best sex possible because they're under God's covering and under His blessing. They never have to worry, am I okay to do this? Or is God pleased with this? They never have to regret or have second guesses or anything like that. Christian couples that are married to each other are within the boundaries that God set to fully enjoy this gift. Because it is more than just a physical pleasure. It is a spiritual connection. God said that actually when the two become one, that's a spiritual reality. And on top of that, it represents how Jesus will become spiritually united, not physically, but spiritually united to His bride, which is the church. So Christians have everything going for us when we talk about the topic of sex and romance. And I think in media, oftentimes the Christian is portrayed as just totally not with it, or they're portrayed as some sort of pervert, and maybe they're supposed to be pure, and oh my gosh, they were secretly a pervert, and oh, what a horrible thing. And it's just a really old, worn out movie trope. We've all seen it a million times. It's just the secular world's way of trying to poke holes in Christianity, and it really doesn't even work. Now, here's where the rubber meets the road. How can a movie portray a vibrant sex life with a married couple without crossing a line that makes that scene inappropriate to view? And I don't just mean that we should avoid nudity. Redeeming Love avoids nudity, but barely. Barely. This movie does have a PG-13, but just barely, because everything that it shows is real close to that R rating. There's sounds, there's motions, there are attributes of this film that are definitely not PG-13. They're probably closer to PG-18 or 20 or something, because honestly, I'm not a prude. I'm here talking about sex and marriage, and I love the intimacy that God gave me and my wife, but I'm telling you that there's something that's inappropriate when it's portrayed on the screen for others to consume. And on this note, I want to say that both Alisa and Ruslan were correct. They were correct to say that it's inappropriate for Christians to observe a sex scene even if there's no nudity. Here's the thing about pornography. It can be something that's not just nudity. With nudity censored, you can still show something pornographic if it's reenacting a sexual act between two people that are married or not married or whatever, but there's not you, and you're not married to them, and you're not supposed to be observing that. And there's a greater problem beyond the visual. God made Adam to be a visual creature and to be attracted to Eve. And for the most part, there are some exceptions, and sometimes the roles are reversed, but for the most part, men are a little more visually stimulated. So for them, pornography is a visual thing, and they look at it and it stirs up in a way that it ought not feelings and emotions. And in the Bible it says, don't stir up love before it so desires. There's an appropriate time to stir up romance, and that's with your wife in the confines of marriage. And so, actually, even if there's no nudity, romance movies like this can be a form of pornography for women, because women are oftentimes, and again, this is a stereotype, sometimes the roles are reversed, but oftentimes women are more stirred and emotionally connected to an idea. They get caught up in the romance and the idea of a man sweeping them off their feet, taking them on an adventure. And there's nothing wrong with that if it's their husband. So even if a woman is not as visually stimulated, she may be romantically stimulated by fantasy. Watching a movie is one of the easiest ways to fall into the trap of fantasy. We start comparing that unrealistic expectation and that fantasy portrayal on the movie screen to what our lives ought to look like. And we think, how come I don't have the perfect relationship? How come my man is not as studly or doesn't do whatever the thing is that the character did in the movie as much? Oh, I just would love to have this kind of romance or this kind of passion. So again, there's got to be a healthy way to show that a romance within a marriage is possible, but not at the expense of somebody's thought life. Because if a movie makes us start to fantasize, I wish I was in that position, I wish I was in their shoes or in that relationship, or I wish I had that relationship, or we're jealous or we're covetous, that's a really bad temptation, as bad as lust, even if it's not about the visual nudity or something else. Ruslan even made a great point when it comes to pornography. Pornography is not just nudity. It's the sexual act that's been presented in a way for someone else as an observer to receive and consume. And that's not how God designed the marriage bed. That's not how He designed the gift of sex either. So I think in a movie, especially a romance movie, there are ways that you can imply that the married couple has zing, they have zest, they have spice, they have this fire, the passionate physical connection with one another, without crossing a line that shows you as the viewer inside their bedroom. There's not supposed to be an observer in your bedroom in real life when you're married and you're being intimate. That's not supposed to happen. So this movie, I think, crosses the line, and I think it does not deserve the PG-13. I think Redeeming Love deserves an R rating. And I don't know if it deserves the Christian moniker. Here's why. The book of Hosea was specifically written to be an allegory of God's relationship to Israel. God was a faithful husband to Israel who was like an unfaithful wife. And in fact, when God told the prophet Hosea to marry a prostitute, it was because Israel had prostituted herself out to all the other gods, to the false idols of the nations around them. Furthermore, it wasn't just because Israel was enticed to these other gods. It was because they went after gain, monetary gain, political power, prestige, or other types of gain. That's just like when a prostitute receives payment for the sexual act. So when Hosea married Gomer, Alisa Childers nailed this point. She said, you're missing the point if you think it's all about whether or not there's a sex scene in the movie. You're missing that the analogy that God wanted not just Israel at that time to know, but all of human history to know. God is giving a very specific analogy. We, His people today, the church, oftentimes act like a prostitute because we go after lesser loves, including sexual intercourse outside of marriage, and we go after lesser pursuits, a title, a name, a platform, power, money, security outside of the Lord. We do all those things just like an unfaithful wife to the husband of our hearts. So Alisa nailed that analogy, and I think that this movie fails in that analogy. The book takes a big departure from the actual Bible. The book portrays a love story where a woman was sold into sex slavery, and because she had a lot of shame, she didn't know her self-worth, and the man comes along to show her, no, you're still worthy of unconditional love. That's a great story. That's a virtuous theme, but it's not the book of Hosea. And I think that the movie does an even less good job of portraying that analogy than the book does. So we're already 3 steps removed from the Bible. That makes me think that this movie is worth ignoring and not even seeing at all. I would even go so far as to say that because of the nature of the sex scenes, because of the nature of the content of prostitution and how the brothel is shown, and there's a lot of stuff going on in the background, there's a lot of weird themes like incest, It's not only not family friendly, I would say this movie is not even worth watching on Netflix or wherever it comes out and fast forwarding, because you'd be fast forwarding most of the movie. I hate to be the Debbie Downer if this was your favorite book, but I think even the fans of the book won't appreciate the movie because it doesn't do the book justice. And even then, like I said, the book doesn't quite do the Bible justice either. Back to my original question, were Ruslan and Alisa correct? I say yes, they were definitely correct. They're on the money. Don't watch this film. Why did the critics pan the film? Now, this is interesting. I'm telling you don't watch the film. I'm telling you it's not really the best Christian example, and I'm also telling you that it's more of a rated R type movie. But the reason the critics panned it was because they thought it was too Christian. Because they could see that there was an attempt to give a Christian theme. They can see that there was an attempt to give, underlying Christian tones, and they hate it. And they think that it's not progressive enough. And the critics, all the reviews that I've read by the critics, think that the movie is not progressive enough. It reinforces a stereotype of the patriarchy and all this kind of gobbledygook. So the 94% score on Rotten Tomatoes is probably from the fans who did enjoy it. They enjoyed the book, and maybe they think, hey, this is my favorite book, so I enjoy the story no matter what. But as a Christian movie reviewer, I'm telling you, whether this was labeled as a Christian film or not, don't see it this time. Hey, I want to know what you have to say. I can be wrong about certain things. I definitely want to have a discussion in the comment section about how it's possible to show a Christian couple that has a passionate sex life in a movie, but without showing the actual deeds in the bedroom. How is it possible? I'm not quite sure I have the solution, but I'm sure a movie maker can come up with an idea. Maybe you're a scriptwriter and you can come up with an idea that would work in a film without crossing a line of impurity.